I remember a day in my life as if it was yesterday. And I was only 17. I was hitchhiking to college. It was an awkward ride as it involved two very different legs, one that went west and one that headed north. I carried an army satchel back then. This was pre-knapsack, and in it were the books I would need that day. And a car pulled over and offered me a ride. And when I mentioned where I was going, the drop-off point that required someone to head north to my final destination, he offered to take me there. Said he had nothing else to do, and well, I thought it was my lucky day. As the car pulled away, almost immediately the conversation started to get weird. He wanted to know what a good-looking guy like me did for fun. Did I have a girlfriend? He started asking me about my sex life. We were traveling at about 100 kilometers an hour. My door was locked and my spider sense went into high gear. This wasn't turning out to be that lucky day. And he started asking if I wanted to pull over and find a place to have breakfast or even spend the day together playing hooky. I had the sense to maintain the conversation, talk to him about the need to get to school for an important exam, and maybe we could meet afterwards. We pulled up in front of the school, the Kirkland campus at John Abbott. He reached over and grabbed my thigh. I slammed that satchel of books so hard into his hand that it hurt my thigh. I pulled the knob up. It was a door lock and got out. I was lucky. I had escaped a predator. And when I had daughters, one of my biggest concerns was the world they were walking into. And that world, almost overnight, also included the internet and social media. So I had no idea what lurked on the streets or behind the screens. Well, my guest today is a brave young man. His name's Harrison Haynes. His predator didn't pick him up when he was hitchhiking. He did so when he was online. And Harrison's here to tell a story about how sophisticated and manipulative those who lurk behind keyboards are, and the dangers that lie within arm's reach.
I don't see the world slowing down. I think we have to find it in ourselves to eliminate the speed and to take away the hurry from our lives and to find rhythm. And a really big part of that is to tear away the tether of these devices. We can set the relationship that we want with them based on our own terms. I mean, we're the user, and we should take that authority back.
After my chat with Harrison, we're going to be joined by Margot Denomme, who spent 25 years as a Crown attorney and in herself is a warrior for protecting our youth. And she's going to talk about a book she's written titled The Family Smartphone Guide.
Not unfettered access to the smartphone. Great devices, but at the right time in our child's life and with the right guardrails.
So this is an episode you do not want to miss. But first, let me welcome to Chatter That Matters, someone who's graced so many TV networks with his story, Harrison Haynes. Harrison, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
You decided to use your story as an example that you hope will help others in terms of countering what lies out on that web. So I really respect you for doing this.
Hey, thanks, man.
Before it happened, just take me back to kind of what were you thinking about, feeling, what were you doing as sort of a young man?
That whole chapter started, I was 11, going straight to middle school. It was a time of transition, a very difficult time for me. I struggled to make friends. I struggled to interact. I struggled in new classes, and it was hard for me. So I took a lot of my frustrations online. I gave up on the in-person friends and, decided that maybe I would connect with people better online. I wasn't the scrawny, short kid with acne. I wasn't the kid who had body image issues. I was the confident gamer who no one could see my face. I would go to school and I would struggle to interact with people and be myself and be confident. And when I went online, I feel like I could be invisible or I could be somebody. I could be whoever I wanted to be.
Video games as well. I mean, was that where you found that you had a bit of a superpower that, by getting on with video games and the smack talk and everything else that goes on, that you felt you had an identity?
It was the only option that my culture had fostered, really. You're either an outdoor kid or you're an indoor kid. You either have friends in person or you have friends online. This online identity that I had cultivated was not only cultivated by myself, but also by my culture.
And you talk about these online communities where you vented and you took it out on. I mean, do you think this is the fishing pond where predators just go after because they know you're putting your hand up for some form of help or relationship and they go, this is low-hanging fruit?
It's so easy for people to become vulnerable online. Your face isn't involved. Your name isn't involved. You can go under a username and your avatar, your character, and you can you can be truly whoever you want to be. So for someone to pick up on the more personable traits, I think it's really easy for people to connect that way.
I read an article one time that said people that are very involved in the Minecraft, super involved in online communities, that I think it was 28% prefer their life online versus their real life. Did you ever get a sense of, I wish I could just stay there and not go into the real world?
I don't think I've ever thought about it like that. For me, it was either one or the other. And I think I really wanted to be able to participate in my community culture and make friends, but it just didn't seem like that was the path that was set out before me.
And where this story gets tragic to me, and I've listened to your podcast, your interviews on Good Morning America and such. Where you talk about the first time you meet Adam. Talk to me about what it was like, the early interactions, because I really want to wake people up to the fact that this isn't just a sledgehammer that comes across. This is flirting and foreplay and all the elements of building a relationship.
For me, Adam was a completely normal individual. I wasn't seeking out a relationship. I wasn't interested in men, and I'm still not. And there was no elements of that at all. It was just one dude met another dude online and was like, wow, you're really fun to play with. You're super good at the game. And we connected in a way that I hadn't been connecting with people in real life. It was like an older brother figure or a mentor.
As you're going through this, do you think that he had a game plan, or was he just, almost like a pinball game and you're a silver ball bouncing around and he's enjoying it? Or do you think that he had an end game from day one?
I've been asked that question multiple times now, and I never know how to answer it. In some ways, I think that the way that it all played out, it could have been perfectly intentionally crafted for the outcome and the result. In other ways, I think he was so young. When I started interacting with him, he was 18, and by the end of it, he was 19. I think he was just really messed up. I think he was just any other kid, and it came out in a really bad way. And all of these feelings, all of this depression, all this anxiety, this self-harm, it had been perverted and had been poured out on some stranger.
I can read it and hear it in your voice that you have such compassion for people, that you still have a place in your heart saying he might have been just as messed up as I was. And it's so easy for people to judge. What kind of tactics did he use at the beginning, and how did they change over time? And was it so subtle that it's almost the frog in the warm water, that the temperature's being turned up? Or did one day you suddenly look at yourself and go, this is going the wrong way?
The first few months of our friendship were completely normal, completely innocent. He would message me on the Xbox app and say, when are you going to get on Call of Duty? Or are we playing Minecraft? It would usually just be us two. He'd ask me, how's your day? How was school? The things that, as much as my parents asked me, the answers I never truly gave them. I'm fine. I felt like we connected at a deeper level where I felt heard and understood and seen. Slowly, he started to talk about more personal things. He would talk about his anxiety that he was feeling. He would ask me about girls that I was interested in. He would talk about sexuality, talk about pornography, his depression, and his self-harm. And so it was really subtle. He was being vulnerable with me, and his vulnerability opened up my vulnerability.
Do you find that they test the waters by talking about pornography, and if there's an itch to be scratched, then they start feeding you more and more, and the next thing you know, instead of talking about it, you're neck deep in whatever he finds online to be gratifying?
It was a very subtle incline, but I was playing pool with my dad the other day, and he was trying to teach me how to get the angles just right so I could get the ball in the hole. And he's like, even the slightest tilt can set the ball real far. And I think that's really accurate of what happened here. It was just slight turns every time, and it set me really far off. It would be, normal conversations about that. How's that thing with that girl going at school? I'd be like, I like her, but I don't think I'm like real attracted to her. And at the time, I wasn't attracted to anybody, men or women, and it was really a confusing time for me. So he really took advantage of that and started sending me pornography and all sorts of content from the internet, and really exploited my growing sense of sexuality. I was 12, I was 13.
And when he's sending you this stuff, is it more male-oriented pornography versus female? Is that, again, another way of he's trying to test the waters? Or was he confused about his sexuality and it was giving you the Baskin Robbins of pornography to see what you're interested in?
Yeah, it was kind of a Baskin Robbins thing. I only consumed female pornography, which is no better. I was pretty bad for a 12, 13-year-old kid. And I think that was frustrating for him. that I was really only interested in the men and women versus the male on male. And I think that made it even worse.
As this is going on, I mean, is this happening over a period of days, weeks, or months?
Oh, this happened over the course of like a year and a half. But this whole perverted sense of the friendship was probably like 9 months.
And how does that start impacting your relationship at school and at home? I mean, at the beginning, you've got a friend, you've got somebody that you can talk to. It's got to be some peace of mind in that. But over time, obviously, it's got to be adding to your anxiety of who you are and why you matter.
He would message me a lot. I ended up getting an iPhone and he started messaging my cell number. He asked for my cell number, which was a really big jump because on the Xbox app, you could report, but on iMessage, you could not. So he got a hold of my phone number and we would call, we would FaceTime, and he would text me whether I was at school or I was at choir practice or I was at family dinner at the table. And more for every time I spent with my friends or the few friends I had or my family or community, he would send me pictures of self-harm or links to pornography to try to draw me back into a quiet place.
How did your parents, I mean, obviously now they must be looking in the rearview mirror and saying, how did we miss so much of this that was going on? And they must feel such tremendous guilt over it. But just how did they start to wake up to the fact that things weren't okay?
I think the worst part was that, like I said before, this wasn't really something that was just specific to my family. The fact that I was being preyed on online seemed pretty specific to my family. But the lifestyle choices that my generation, that me and my brothers, we took on, this is just a part of our culture. You know, boys stay home and play video games or you go and play sports. It's really one or the other. So I think for them, they weren't really concerned. You know, they'd hear me talking on the microphone. I would be laughing late into the night. It seemed like I was just a normal kid to them.
So walk us through the night where your parents eventually find out what's happening.
It was a hard night, I think, for all of us. I'm really keen to call this our chapter of the story rather than just mine. This affected my whole family. This was after weeks on weeks of him sending me self-harm content, trying to lure me into sending photos and videos of myself. I hadn't done it, and he had been growing really frustrated that I hadn't. I was really concerned for his safety, for his mental health. I didn't want to do it, and I was starting to be convinced that if I did, that maybe I'd save his life. He was really preying on my sense of compassion, my sense of empathy. And one night, my phone's buzzing off, and my parents are asleep, and they're in the bedroom right next door. And I go downstairs and get my phone and sneak it back upstairs, and he's been calling me all night. And so I pick up and he tells me, you know, Harrison, if you don't show me your body tonight, I'm going to kill myself. And so I hear him on the cell phone. He's starting to assemble what sounds like a household handgun. I was so afraid. I was so angry. I started to cry. I started to yell a little bit. And my parents, they had woken up and they had come over to my room and, you know, I've got my phone. This is a violation of our family rules. I'm in my room with my phone at night. And so they took it and they went through my phone that night and they saw everything. I mean, everything. I can't imagine they slept a wink.
That's got to be tough for all of you. What was the next morning like?
The next morning was really a challenge. They wanted me to explain. And I did. I told them I had this friend online and that I was scared. They were asking all sorts of questions. If I was safe, if I had seen him. And they started asking me questions like, well, are you self-harming? And I couldn't answer the question, no. All of those things that he had shown me, I started to practice to curb my anxiety, to curb my depression. So right there in front of me, they FaceTimed him. The most nerve-wracking part was that they said, you know, hey, Adam, this is Harrison's parents, and we want to talk to you. And he's eating cereal like nothing's wrong. Like he's done nothing wrong. He looks him in the eyes and says the most stale, the most cold, the most plastic I'm sorry I'd ever heard.
And do you think he had other Harrisons in his life, or was it he was just so consumed by you?
You know, I had talked to his mother. My parents had connected with her on Facebook a few weeks later after we had gotten the police involved. And we had contacted her and told her what had been going on. And she was convinced. At first, she didn't believe it. She's like, no, not my son. This is not possible. And then she was convinced that I was not the only one involved.
What happened to Adam?
my parents had gotten in contact with our local community police, our resource officer at my school, and just to make sure that I was safe at school. They had contacted his home state of New Jersey, tried to press charges, unfortunately over state lines, and at the time, he had done nothing wrong. He had sent sexually suggestive photos of himself. They weren't nude. He was 19. He had sent me links to pornography, but it wasn't indecent exposure. And I know that laws are different now, but to my knowledge, he is still free. I spoke to him a few years later. I had gone through a radical healing journey. I found real tangible community. I got plugged into a church and I learned about a little something called forgiveness. And so I messaged him. I found him online and I just wanted to tell him that, as hard as it was for me to go through that and that healing journey and figuring out myself and my identity and stopping self-harm and the consumption of pornography, that after everything, that I hope that he's doing better. I hope that he's able to find someone who cares about him, to be involved in some sort of community, and that I forgive him ultimately. And the message that he sent me back was, "Aren't you scared?" And I said, "Scared of what?" And he said, "Scared you're going to get caught again." I was like, "Get caught in what?" He's like, "Talking to me." So I just moved on.
When we return, Harrison's going to share with us what he's learned from a research study where he encourages people to replace their smartphone with a dumb phone and how it's creating a mental renaissance. And then Margot Denomme is also going to join the show. She was a Crown attorney for 25 years. And instead of enjoying retirement, she's become a crusader to help families deal with this crisis of what happens and what is lurking behind those keyboards.
Hi, it's Tony Chapman, host of Chatter That Matters. You lock your doors, you protect your valuables, but how about your online activities? Cybercrime has become a household word, one of the biggest concerns facing businesses today. A big shout out to RBC for creating The Vault, an online cyber safety playbook packed with tips and steps you can take to counter cyber threats. Visit rbc.com/cyber and download your playbook today. Helping you protect your online activities? Well, that matters to RBC.
Privacy and safety do not have to exist separately. They can coexist. Creating a culture of destigmatizing conversations, parents having hard conversations with their kids, talking about sex, talking about porn, talking about self-harm, and also holding these platforms accountable for their lack of safeguards for kids.
My guest today is Harrison Haynes. He was at a very young age lured by a predator online, offered and encouraged to do things that would make any parent sick to their stomach. He not only survived, but he's been willing to tell his tale and dedicate his life to helping other young 12 and 13-year-olds counter what is happening every day on what we call the silver screen. After this happened, you chose to disconnect from technology. Was that your choice, your parents' choice, a combination of the two, or?
Yeah, I really pulled back from technology all throughout high school. I hopped off social media. I really pulled back my screen time. I tried to live a really essential kind of life, the life that I knew that I needed. When I went to college, things really changed for me. I said, you know what? I want to make real friends. I want to find real community. And so I made the intentional decision to exchange my smartphone for a dumb phone for 1.5 years.
And what did you learn about yourself?
I think the biggest thing that I learned were moments of silence and boredom were portals to prayer and introspection to learn more about myself and my creator. It was a really special time.
You strike me as someone that's incredibly mature for a young man. You've chosen to really share this story and be very courageous about it and very vocal about it. Why?
I buried it for a long time. I didn't tell anybody in high school. I thought it was just one of those things that had happened to me and it wasn't a relevant part of my journey. I tried really hard to forget it, to the point where when I started coming back and starting to try to remember again, I had to actually go through counseling to remember. I had to talk about it, and I wanted to be able to make an impact on people's lives that was really tangible, that was real. So I started doing political advocacy, and eventually I joined a legislative coalition where we write laws to help people like 13-year-old me. I found that healing out in the open has been one of the best decisions that I've ever made, because shame is a tool of something really dark, and I want nothing to do with that.
Have you ever been attacked by people for coming out and telling your story?
Not me. I think my parents certainly have. My parents, I get messages all the time on the social media platforms. Where was his father? Where was his mother? Do they not love him? And all I could say was that my parents are right here at home. They love me. My parents said, it's never going to be my kid. And look where we are.
As you started dating, and realizing that there was a person that other people would be attracted to, how hard was that at the beginning? Or did you bury the story so far that it was only after therapy unlocked it?
It was really hard for me to start to engage personal relationships again. Even further than dating was just a mentorship. I really just wanted to come under somebody's wing and to go through this healing journey with somebody. It was rocky. The pornography really made it hard for me to connect with the girls that I had been with. And as far as where I am now, pornography is just barely peeking through the door, and I'm ready to shut it for good.
How do you think pornography is impacting young men? Because I don't want to sound like an old person, but access to unfiltered pornography, video gaming, and weed, and the combination of the three can very quickly put somebody thinking that they're living their life, but really just spinning their tires in wet cement.
It's a really challenging cultural phenomenon. I was asked recently by Ava Smithing at the Young People's Alliance. She asked me, what do you think the benefit of pornography is? And honestly, I didn't have an answer for her. Pornography is not helpful. It is not constructive. If anything, it robs you. It robs young men of their first sexual experience to be able to explore their partner intimately and love and compassion and empathy and just exist with somebody. But we've been so cold and so sterile to say that they have to be prepared for their first sexual encounter, that they have to sit behind a cold screen while they educate themselves. I just don't think that this is a productive worldview at all. I think if anything, it's creating victims and perpetrators, not a sexually educated America.
I'm fascinated what you're doing now, because when you were in college, you traded your smartphone in for a dumb phone. Now you're writing a book about that experience and getting other people to do it. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing and where you hope this research leads us.
I loved my time with the dumb phone, honestly. The first few weeks were a challenge. And I feel like I came awake to the people around me. I felt more human than I'd ever been, and only to realize that people had felt this way for thousands of years, unencumbered by the infinite internet in their pocket. I felt like I could connect to people better. I feel like when I saw people, I knew them better. And as far as the other people's experiences, I recently just started pioneering a study for the book I'm writing called The Moments Between Moments. And we are starting a 3-week dumb phone experience. People are exchanging their smartphone for a dumb phone for 3 weeks alongside a series of interviews. And Tony, I got to tell you that the findings are astounding. These real human experiences of people saying, I feel alive. I love doing things I used to hate. Waking up is easier. Going to sleep is easier. I feel like I can smile more. I feel like laughing is easier. One of the people in the study said, you know how you just kind of wander through life? I was like, yeah. He said, I don't do that anymore.
Harrison, do you think this happened to you for a reason? That obviously you've talked about your church and your community. Do you think there's a greater calling for you that you had to go through this so that you can be an advocate and a warrior to hopefully help a lot of the other 13-year-old Harrisons out there that are self-harming, getting addicted to pornography, getting lured by predators?
I think I could have had any sort of infinite possibility of where I could end up, but I knew that no matter what happened to me, God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, absolutely used my human experience, my lived experience to make something great. I don't think that he ever wanted to put this on me, but I think he saw an opportunity to make something really special.
I always end my shows with my 3 takeaways, and I'm struggling a little bit because the obvious one is, you're courageous. You have been given a calling. Your circumstances is what gives you such authenticity and such composure and conviction that we've got to do more to protect people. The second thing is, we just touched on it, but how important mentorship is. And you were looking for a mentor online. I think we're all looking for people in our life that can guide us. And it was interesting how this story went from the older brother to suddenly the person crying out for help and harming themselves and asking you to save them. And this whole convoluted cauldron that happened of this, swirling around. and somebody that just had a very evil heart. And your compassion for him is something that I admire, because other people that might have spent the rest of their life trying to go for revenge. But the thing that you said is this moments between moments is, to me, the essential part of this podcast, that I no longer wander through life. I feel alive. And I think we're being so seduced into these screens. In fact, if anything, we're just being puppets on a stage, and we're not being human beings anymore. And my fourth takeaway is what you said very early in the show about rhythm, and that we are in control of our destiny. We are in control of our screens. And as fast as this planet is, it doesn't mean we have to skip and step with it. So for all of that and more, I have great gratitude that you've agreed to join me, and I'm happy you're this boy that had to grow up so quickly is maybe now just slowing down the aging process and enjoying life for what it is as well. So that makes me very happy as well.
Yeah, you just got to breathe deep, man.
Joining me now is Margot Denomme. I'm thrilled to have her on the podcast. In fact, the reason Harrison was on my podcast was her suggestion. Margot's an accomplished author, former Crown attorney, and she's the founder of Raising Awareness About Digital Dangers, RAADD. After 26 years of witnessing how social media and smartphones can harm children's mental health, their self-esteem, their safety, Margot decided to take action. She authored the Family Smartphone Guide, practical and empowering resource that helps families navigate the digital landscape safely and confidently. What fuels her passion? She wants to protect children, and she wants to equip parents with the tools to raise resilient, tech-savvy kids. Margot, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Tony.
You gave a lot to society in terms of a Crown attorney in 25 years. Why didn't you just go away and retire and enjoy life? It seems like you've taken on such a big cause. I mean, you're speaking all the time. You've written a book. You're an advocate. What inspired and motivated you to say, this is what I want to do in the next chapter of my life?
I, as a mom of two daughters, I've navigated these challenges myself, and just trying to figure out how to raise kids who are confident, with self-esteem, and also tech savvy in this digital world. It's a difficult journey, and it's unprecedented for parents. And not only that, I think what struck me as well is over the years, I've seen so many kids in court making poor decisions, as a result sometimes of low self-esteem or damaged self-worth and just kind of rudderless. And I've also seen the unfortunate consequences that come about because of their actions or, their impulsive actions. So I think those two paths in my personal journey led me to meet Dr. Michelle Ponte. And Dr. Michelle Ponte is the chair of the Canadian Pediatric Society's Digital Task Force. So she and I got together last spring, and we put together a presentation about the physical, mental, and legal implications of smartphone use. And the response from parents was overwhelming. And it was at that point that I really realized we need a comprehensive, easy to digest resource. We came up with the Family Smartphone Guide.
One of the things I loved about what your book is a family contract for digital use. Now, the last thing I imagine a kid wants to sit down and realize there's a contract, but tell me how that came about and why it's proving to be one of the most powerful mechanisms to creating some kind of level playing field between what the parents want and what the children want.
Well, it actually started because when I gave my own children a smartphone some 12 years ago, call it an occupational hazard, but I did not give it to them lightly. And there were rules and restrictions around it. And so I, at that time, drafted a contract. And because I knew that, first of all, I was paying the bill. So that was definitely generated the contract in and of itself. But also that I wanted them to know that it was a privilege and not a right to have this smartphone. And there had to be some rules and regulations around its use, because I didn't want unfettered access. And at that point, of course, we weren't even close to the dangers that we see now, but it was still an unknown quantity. And I thought, let's put some boundaries in place. So the one that's included in the family smartphone guide is a more fulsome contract. And I can't emphasize enough, because it's in the contract, to keep the phones out of the bedroom.
Parents need to approach smartphones like handing over the car keys. Brilliant, because, when I hand over the car keys to my daughters the first times, I did that with a lot of dread. I made sure that they knew exactly how to drive. So I love what you had to say, but for kids, they're going, Mom, come on, it's a smartphone.
Believe me, I dealt with my fair share of eye rolling, but I'm prepared to deal with that out of safety. And this is really a safety issue. And that's why, as you know, the family smartphone guide mimics the driver's handbook. There is a smartphone on wheels on the front of it, and it's meant to mimic the driver's handbook. You didn't just give your child the keys and say, off you go. Think about the preparation that we do. Cars have risks. They pose risks. You have to know the rules of the road. And now that we have so many studies to tell us about the dangers that are happening with smartphones, we need to employ the same guardrails for our children that we do with driving.
Are you proposing, for example, the same way they sort of woke up and had started graduating driver's licenses, that we should be thinking about smartphones that each year we open up more opportunities with it? Or do you just feel that's a lost cause because the kids will find a way to hack that?
Well, they can't hack it if they don't have one. But there's lots of ways that we can graduate to their own smartphones. Having a family computer on the kitchen table, that we can talk about digital literacy, that we can talk about the digital footprint, that we can talk about stranger danger, what I have in the guide being the tricky ickies, like people that, the red flags that kids are going to come across as they become more involved.
You're called on a lot to be a keynote speaker, and I know at times it's parent groups and the hands go up. There's 5,000 questions for you at the end. You mentioned, for example, the computer in the kitchen, digital literacy, but what are the other things that you equip parents with so that they stand a chance against kids that are so much more tech savvy than they are?
To delay as long as they can, to help their child create self-esteem and confidence from within, and develop passions before they ever place a piece of technology in their hands. When people don't even have a sense of themselves, and now they're seeing all of these curated lives online and filtered images, and I've been speaking about this for years with my Celebrate You tour. It's so critical that we teach kids to be skeptical about what they're seeing online, because very often, as you and I know, it is filtered. If
you don't have the foundations in place, it's almost impossible not to get seduced by the seduction of the internet.
And if you don't have any basis of comparison, that there was life without it. This is all within the last 17 years, but we remember life without it. Even my kids who are now 22 say, I remember life without a phone. And it's a magical time that everybody reflects upon.
Margot, how do people get hold of you? What's the best way to say, I'd love you to come out and speak at my conference, or I want to buy your book? Is it just direct to your website? Is it via Amazon?
The book is available on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com. My website is Raising Awareness Against Digital Dangers, and my contact information is on the website.
Margot, I really appreciate you joining me on Chatter That Matters, and what a ending to a great conversation with Harrison, to have somebody that spent 25 years as a Crown attorney and the context. And I'm just so proud of you for not meandering into retirement, but taking this on as a personal crusade. I think the world's better for it.
Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.